am back in my car, second week in a row. This video is gonna be something that I've been thinking about, I've been kind of like ruminating on. So this video is gonna be titled, What Quarantine Has Taught Me About My Body. I think it's taught me more than I ever thought it would. The first thing to note is that, like I said in my last video, I'm a fitness instructor. I take high intensity HIIT classes, I lift heavy weights, and I'm always running around New York City from one gym to the other, to work, to school. I'm always running around. The body that I have, it's, you know, definitely a byproduct of that. Going into quarantine, I was nervous. I was like, okay, I'm an Equinox instructor. Like, I work at a gym. I no longer am going to the gym. You know, I don't have the weights that I normally lift. I don't have the classes. And a large part of the motivation of those classes is you have the music and you have the lights and you have the instructor and you have the people around you. Like, those are the things that make you work out harder. So although there are these online classes, they're just truly not the same, which, you know, that's just the way it is. But they are still effective. They're just not the same. And so I was in for a wild ride. I was wondering, you know, how is this going to affect me? I wanted to go into this with kind of the outlook that whatever does happen to my body as a result of this, I'm not going to beat myself up over it. I'm not going to hold myself to the standard that I normally would because I'm not living the normal life that I would. And I talked about this previously on Instagram, but I'm definitely not quarantoning. I'm not trying to get that like ideal summer body in quarantine. I know a lot of people were doing that where at first they were like, oh, like I'm going to get in the best shape of my life, fitness, whatever, which is great for them. Like, that's totally awesome. But the thing about my personal routine is that I went from being always active and literally working out to my maximum potential to not doing that anymore. So there really was no way for me to exceed what I was doing. It was really only to revert to kind of like take back some of that fitness. But that being said, I want to get into kind of what I learned from that, because oddly enough, I weigh a little bit less. I just got on the scale. I don't really weigh myself ever. For the purpose of this video, I got on the scale today and I weigh literally a few pounds less than when I started quarantine. And that doesn't mean that I'm more fit, because I'm not. I mean, it's probably muscle loss. That's kind of not the point of this video. What I want to talk about is that your body changes, and it's not necessarily a good change or a bad change. And my body can look two completely different ways and still be healthy in each way. And I want to get into that because I'm very excited about this. I have to say, I do feel very good right now. I feel super fit and super active. It's just in a different way than what I was used to. First point is that I can stay fit while at home. I can stay fit while not being in the gym. And it's going to be harder. It's going to be different. It's possible and it's enjoyable. In New York, I would take HIIT classes. I would lift heavy weights. So that was kind of my routine. I was always lifting heavy. I was like definitely gaining strength and just like intensity. And now what I do is I do a lot of running. I go on long walks. I do a lot of running. I've been doing some HIIT classes maybe once, maybe twice a week with what weights I have, which is limited. So it's definitely not as effective as the Equinox HIIT classes, which is totally fine. But to supplement that, I've been running a lot. I've been making sure I go on long walks. I've just been implementing activity into my day in new ways. I've also been teaching classes recently, very recently, with a tennis company, all body weight. So I've been doing a little bit of body weight exercises as well. It's interesting because I was talking about this with my sister, and I feel as though my body is different. And I noticed it a couple weeks ago. We've been in quarantine for almost 3 months now. The first couple weeks I didn't notice anything because nothing had really changed. I was still, you know, had the same pretty much amount of muscle, and I was just kind of like on vacation in terms of like not lifting heavy. But I definitely noticed through doing a lot of running, because running is a lot of cardio, and that's really great for your body. It's not great for putting on muscle, which has been my primary goal for a long time. I noticed that I feel a lot leaner. Not leaner. I feel different. My body feels different right now. And it's not bad different. It's not good different. I don't prefer this over my body from a couple months ago, but I definitely feel like I have more of a runner's body versus like a strength training body. And I think that's interesting. And I think it's okay to accept that and say, okay, cool. Right now I'm focusing on running as a training, and I'm getting really good cardiovascular health. Clearing my head, I'm training my body to have high stamina. And I think that's very important. And I think that it's cool to be able to adapt your training, knowing that eventually I'll go back to more strength training as a focus, and accepting that over this passage of time, I don't need to penalize myself for losing any strength that I've gained, because I'm gaining things in other areas that supplement that. And then when I go back to my strength training, I will have gained all of this running experience, getting used to running faster and running farther. And I can take all of those things that I learned and I've gained from this stint of like running every single day and apply that to the strength training and the HIIT classes that I take. I think that's going to be an interesting transition. And I think that's the thing about fitness, is that there's no end all be all. You adapt, you change. And I experienced this with an injury a couple years ago. I hurt my knees just through running all the time on a treadmill, and I had to stop doing cardio. The doctor was like, you cannot do cardio for like a couple months, or else you're literally gonna like hurt your knees even further. And I thought to myself, all I was doing was cardio at this point. And I was like, how am I gonna stay fit if I don't do cardio? Like, I thought my life was over. I was like, this is awful. But then I decided to transition, do some research, adapt, and I looked into how to get pull-ups was like my main goal. I'm like, okay, cool. What's the thing you can do without your knees? You can do pull-ups. Your knees are not in any part of pull-ups at all. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to do pull-ups. And so I started focusing on strength training, lat pull downs and like jumping up at the bar and holding and like all that kind of stuff. And through that, I started to try, other arm exercises and then other leg exercises that didn't involve high impact. Actually, through all those things, it transitioned me in this whole new side of fitness that I find to be my favorite, which is strength training and lifting weights. And honestly, I think that it was a blessing in disguise, because it led me on this path to learning so much more about fitness. And I think that's kind of what's happening now. Through my transition into more of a cardio-based training right now, I've learned I've always loved running, but I really do love it. I find it both physically and mentally just clarifying. It clears my head. It gives me endorphins. It makes me feel kind of free in a way, and it's also a challenge too, both mentally and physically. And I think that setting challenges for yourself and achieving them is a huge thing, especially now, given that there's not really a lot we can control. If you can control, how many miles you run, it definitely makes you feel accomplished. So that's basically the transition of my training. So I used to train more strength and HIIT classes and all of that, and now I'm doing primarily cardio, primarily running, which is just a product of my situation. It's not a preference. It's not one or the other. My body's definitely changing from that, and it's not a bad thing. It's just a thing. I loved my body before, I love my body now, but it's different. It's definitely, my body makeup feels different, and that's totally fine. What quarantine has taught me about my body is that my body can change from one situation to another, and it doesn't have to be negative, and it doesn't have to be positive. And I can take on many forms in my life, and that's okay. It's just a sign of the season that I'm in. So that's just the way it is. And I think that's a really good lesson, is that you don't need to obtain and hold on to this one ideal body type, because for each person, there's so many different ways that you could go, and one is no better than the other. They're all just different. So I also wanted to touch on the fact that quarantine has taught me a lot about my body and stress. It's funny because quarantine obviously is a very stressful time mentally, but physically it's not as stressful. So it's been that balance of, I went from having a very high stress life physically to a very high stress life mentally, because physically I was always running around and working out and teaching classes, and it was like my body was always going and I was always sore. And mentally, of course, I was in school, I was in work and all that. But then when I transitioned into quarantine, I just felt all this mental stress, but then I wasn't putting as much physical stress on my body because I was staying home. And so that transition from mental to physical, from physical stress to mental stress, and also just understanding that like through running and through meditation, things like that, like there are ways to relieve the stress from my body. So I learned a lot. I've been learning a lot about stress in my body during quarantine and how to relieve it. I think putting on a really amazing playlist, just getting outside, getting some fresh air, or just running is like the best way to relieve stress for me. And I've really learned that, and I'm gonna carry that with me just to keep that in my back pocket. If I'm having a really stressful day, no matter where I am, no matter what year it is or what the state of the world is, I can put on my headphones, go for a run, and just let it all go. And of course, I've had that mentality in New York, but it wasn't as strong because I wasn't as big of a runner. Now I'm just very focused on the mental aspect of it. The change in my body, it's not inflamed as much. It's not as sore all the time, and like putting less physical stress on my body, I'm sure it's been good for me. I'm sure it has been, because I was cutting it kind of, I was kind of going crazy in New York with the amount of physical stress. Also, rest in general does wonders. I mean, I'm just not working out as much, so my body experiences so much more rest, and I feel amazing. Like, I genuinely feel so good. I get the right amount of sleep every single night. What quarantine has taught me about my body is that I don't have to push it to the limit to have this fit body. I can have a fit body, and I don't have to go to these insane classes every single day to maintain that. I can have more rest, and I can just be more strategic with what kind of workouts I'm doing. And yeah, I think rest is something I've been working on for a long time, but this has really forced me into it. And I think in the end, in the long run, it has been good for me and good for my body to experience some rest. Stress and fitness have such an interesting correlation. The more I seem to be active, the less stress I have. And that's just an important lesson. And also learning to accept change and be open to change and not hold so much emotion in a tiny physical change, because it doesn't really matter. Our bodies are here to carry us to where we need to go. It's not all about how perfect we look or how shredded we look. It's about how do you feel, and are you going to where you need to go, and are you happy in your body? And I think those are the most important things. I don't know, I just think that quarantine has allowed me to kind of explore this new space mentally and just try new things and kind of give myself a new perspective on my body. It's definitely a vessel for me to accomplish things, and not something that I need to fit into this mold of what I want it to be. So that's all I'm gonna say. All right guys, thank you for watching Fitness Friday. I hope you're liking these videos. If you have any suggestions for what you wanna see, let me know. I'm gonna go for a run. Are you surprised? I'll see you guys next Friday for another Fitness Friday.